just in case, you know? Nothing wrong with a little preemptive protection. Hey guys, my name is Cassidy and you're watching That Spooky Lifestyle, where we bring the ooky, the spooky, the creepy and the crawly into our everyday lives. Before we get started in this video, I want you guys to know it is going to be a 3-part series, as well as each video is going to have some gore, some spookiness. We are talking about scary topics. There's only going to be one warning at the beginning of each video, and if you stick around, it's your own damn fault. By the title of this video, you guys know that we are talking about the many faces of Bloody Mary. Now, I called it this because Bloody Mary doesn't have any clear origins. There are a number of theories out there on where this kind of legend stems from. Today, I'm basically going to do my makeup and talk about Bloody Mary origin stories. So grab a blanket, grab a snack, because we're about to get spooky. If you've watched any of my previous kind of spooky get ready with me videos, you know I always like to talk about what I already know about the subject. For Bloody Mary, essentially it's a game that you play where you go into a bathroom, you turn off the lights, you look into the mirror and you say Bloody Mary 3 times. At least that's the version that I knew of growing up. I would say people usually do this at like girls' sleepovers when you're like 12, 13, kind of in that age range. But I remember when I was little, I actually did this at one of my friend's birthday parties, and he was a boy. A bunch of girls and a bunch of boys, and we went into the bathroom, we turned the lights off, and we said Bloody Mary 3 times just to, you know, you do it just to kind of scare each other and get that rush and be like, oh my god, I saw something, and everyone like freaks out, right? So that's really all I know about Bloody Mary. Like, I've never really known the origin of it, but like, damn, I went down a rabbit hole. If you find yourself on page 13 on Google, it's been a day, girl. It's been a day. There are literally no end to the conspiracies of like who Bloody Mary might actually be. Our current list of Bloody Mary suspects includes Elizabeth Bathory, Bloody Mary of Wales, Black Agnes, Agnes or Aggie, there's kind of a couple different variations there, Mary Worthington or Mary Worth, as well as Queen Mary. I want to make it very clear, it is Queen Mary, not Mary Queen of Scots. Some people get it confused and think that Mary Queen of Scots is supposed to be a suspect of Bloody Mary, but she's absolutely not. And there are many people like me who feel very strongly about that in the spooky community, so I just want to clear that up. Did you think that was it? Oh no. There are also a lot of other people suspected to be the origins of Bloody Mary. I'm just gonna ramble these ones off because we aren't gonna be talking about them. They were either less interesting or just didn't really have any story to them that I could find, and so other suspects include Mary Johnson, Mary Jane, Sally, Kathy, Mary Lee, and Savat Madame. The first person we are going to be talking about today is Elizabeth Bathory. Now, if you are any sort of part of the spooky, like true crime community, you will have heard this name before. So we are going to talk about her and honestly, like the really crazy, gross shit. Like, she was mentally unstable, to say the least. Or was she? We're also going to be talking about that conspiracy. Elizabeth Bathory was born in Transylvania in 1560 to a very distinguished family, and that is important. She was born to like a family that included cardinals, judges, kings, knights. Like, her family had the hookup. Her family was very distinguished, very rich, very powerful. Keep in mind, just because her family was high-ranking does not mean that they were nice. Apparently, it's been reported that her uncle taught her like ways of Satanism and her auntie taught her ways in sadomasochism. I mean, hearing that, one could probably deduce that she was abused as a child, because those are not normal things to teach a young girl. I'm probably gonna pronounce this wrong, but here we go. At the age of 12, 13 in there, she was betrothed to Ferenc Nadasi. This is pronouncing his last name first and then his Nadojdi Ferenc. We're just gonna call him Ferenc. At the age of 12, 13, she was betrothed to Ferenc. At this time, unfortunately, she was pregnant from a kind of lower order guy, and when Ferenc found out, he fucking went off. He had the man castrated, and then he was eaten by dogs. Basically what happened to Elizabeth's baby is it was kind of swept under the rug. Like, she had the baby and then the baby was taken away, and it was just kind of one of those things like, we don't talk about that anymore. At the age of 14, they finally married. Remember, it was a different time in 1560. People were dying at the age of like 30. They had to really speed everything else up. So at the age of 14, they got married. They moved into a castle together, and at the request of Elizabeth, Ferenc actually built her a torture chamber within this castle. Like, a bit of an odd request. Ferenc was also like, I don't know what the word is, but like, he was a soldier, so he went away a lot. Like, he was really into being a soldier. I don't know why I'm just blanking on like the sentence that I need right now. Anyway, so Ferenc was away a lot. Elizabeth actually took quite a few lovers while he was away. During the time she lived in the castle, she did start to create a reputation for herself for torturing servant girls. Elizabeth would do things like jam pins and needles under their fingernails. She would smother them in honey and then just watch like ants and bees attack them. Like, she'd tie them down and just watch the bugs get them. The crazy thing too is that her husband Ferenc actually took part in a lot of this as well. So like, he was aware that she was doing all this, and like, he was into it too, and they were just kind of like doing it together. Like, so Ferenc died in the 1600s when Elizabeth was 43, and it said that after he died, she really just like went off the rails, and like, apparently he was the one kind of keeping her like a little bit more controlled. I was gonna say normal, but like, obviously not. So after he died, Elizabeth, and apparently the help of some of her favorite servants, it said that like her previous nurse and a local witch helped her abduct peasants around the town to torture and kill in her little castle torture chamber. This is when Elizabeth really started going crazy on the torture aspect and not holding back at all. It said that she would bite off chunks of flesh from these peasants that she like kidnapped. She would make the peasants cook and eat their own flesh. She'd poke them with hot iron. She'd poke them with needles. She'd burn their lips. She'd sew their lips shut. She also poured ice on them and then just left them outside to freeze and die. Like, she was doing the most. It's also reported that she loved using scissors on her victims. In her spare time, it said that she loved like cutting them with scissors and like cutting in between their fingers with the scissors. Like, ugh. Now I know what you're thinking. What is tying this woman, although she's obviously crazy, horrific, what is tying her to the Bloody Mary legend? Well, apparently Elizabeth thought that if you drank the blood of young girls, it would keep you young and beautiful forever. So this, in fact, did give her the nickname of the Blood Countess, which some people point to as being connected to Bloody Mary. There's actually also circulated rumors that Elizabeth was a vampire. She's kidnapping people and then drinking their blood. I mean, I would think she's a vampire too. And then obviously with all this crazy shit going on, people, like, there were reported accounts of people saw her actually having sex with the devil. They were just like, yep, I've seen that with my own eyes. Again, going back to her well-connected family, the reason she got away with this is because she was very rich, very powerful, and what are the peasants going to do, right? So she actually got away with this for quite a few years. And, you know, when rumors circulated, anyone who could do anything or anyone who was in a position of power just kind of ignored it, swept it under the rug, because it was just like, oh, that's just Elizabeth, she's fine, whatever, doing what she's doing over there. However, her evil reign did come to kind of a slow stop in 1610 as King Matthias started looking into the missing girls and what was going on, because apparently after Elizabeth started kidnapping peasant girls and torturing them, she moved on to girls from noble families, and that's when the noble people or people of power who could do something were starting to be like, whoa, girl. So what actually happened is Elizabeth opened her castle as like a school to teach manners or teach good manners, right? So noble people would send their children to her castle to learn the manners and learn how to act like a woman, and then they would basically disappear. And they wouldn't hear from their daughter for months, and, you know, they wouldn't hear anything from Elizabeth, and so that's when it started becoming an issue. Elizabeth and her servants were convicted of killing 80 women, but rumors have circulated that Elizabeth kept a diary of all the names of all the girls that she tortured and killed, and apparently there's supposed to be 650 names in there, but this diary has never been found. There's never been physical evidence of it, just whispers. Obviously, only Elizabeth escaped execution. All of her servants were killed because of this, and Elizabeth was actually locked away in a room where there was just slits for air and for someone to pass her food. And I think she lived there for about 3 years and then she passed away. So she died in 1614. Seems pretty cut and dry, right? She's evil, you know, the evil caught up with her and she died. However, there is a shocking plot twist that because King Matthias owed her husband a huge debt, so remember Ferenc? Matthias, the king at the time in the 1610, he owed Ferenc lots of money. When Ferenc died, he then owed Elizabeth a bunch of money. It said that Matthias never wanted to pay this debt, so what he did is started to create rumors that Elizabeth was this crazy evil person and then had her locked away so that he didn't have to repay the debt that he owed them. So it's not out of the question to think that she could be framed, especially being a woman of power back in those days, especially since the accounts from any peasants around at the time, like, they would have been pressured by Matthias and his people, right, to be like, say something bad about Elizabeth. So there could have been inconsistent stories, and then anything that they could pin against Elizabeth, they would. But there's also just a lot of evidence to say that Elizabeth was just a crazy bitch as well. So go with your gut on that one. That is the first monster that is connected to the Bloody Mary myths. As you can see, she was a batshit crazy lady, but you know, there's no real connection to a mirror or candles or anything like that. The only connection really is that she's called the Blood Countess because she used to drink the blood of young girls. Now let's move on to Bloody Mary of Wales, because this is also a really good one. So Old Man Wales was an evil ass man, okay? He was greedy, he didn't care about other people except his wife. He did actually really love his wife, but damn, he just like really loved money too. Apparently, he's supposed to be a farmer, but when that farm money wasn't enough for him, because like I said, he's greedy, what he would do is catch runaway slaves and lock them up in his barn, and then he would resell them for kind of like a side hustle. However, on certain months when he couldn't find runaway slaves or was kind of having like a dry spell, he would just capture regular free men and sell them. He liked money and he didn't give a crap if what he was doing was totally wrong because he's evil. So when the Civil War ended slavery, this really shook Mr. Wales because now he didn't have any additional source of income, and then on top of that, his wife that he loved so much actually ended up dying in childbirth. So it was kind of a rough time for him. Not that anyone cares because he was a total dick who just like captured people and sold them for profit, but I'm just saying, like, if he was already crazy and insane before, like now even more so. However, the child did not die, but Mr. Wales hated her. He blamed her for the death of his wife, and he just despised this cute, adorable little girl named Mary. He would dress her in rags, like he didn't care about her. He made her do all the farm chores, he would starve her. He really just treated her like a slave, honestly. Even though he treated her like garbage, this cute little adorable girl still loved her evil father. So as Mary started to grow up, obviously she started to look a lot like her mother, and this drove Mr. Wales absolutely crazy. Every time he saw her, he was just reminded of his wife, how much he loved her, and the loss that he had, and it drove him mad. One night, after a heavy bout of drinking, Mr. Wales stumbles into Mary's bedroom and stabs her repeatedly with a knife. So as this attack was happening, Mary was screaming, there was blood flying, chunks of her body falling off. It was a really violent and like rage-filled attack. Once Mary had like passed away, Mr. Wales grabbed her body, or what was left of it, took her down to the basement and just kind of dumped her in this hole that he had. He didn't make a grave or anything like that. It was just like tossing away trash into a hole, burning it up and being like, glad I'm done with that kind of thing. So 2 nights after this violent attack occurred, Mr. Wales is out doing his nightly chores. He finishes up and walks back into the house, and he sees Mary standing there in the kitchen. Her head is half falling off, she's got chunks and scars all over her, there's a pool of blood on the floor, and she's just staring at him. And he hears this ghostly whisper of someone saying, "Father." So obviously Mr. Wales like freaks the hell out, and he jumps up, runs out of the house and kind of turns around to look, and the apparition is gone. So, you know, he's kind of just like telling himself like to calm down, you know, you're just having a freak out, dude. Like, relax. She's not actually here yet. About a week later, Mr. Wales is sitting in his living room just reading the newspaper, and he kind of looks up and he sees Mary again sitting in the living room across from him. Again, just gory, bloody, scary looking girl. And again, she says, "Father." And so he's freaking out, and then he sees that she's holding 2 kind of like needle points, you know what I mean, for people who knit. And she actually runs at him and stabs him with the needles. Obviously Mr. Wales freaks out, runs out of the house, and again turns around and the apparition is gone, but he still has the needles in him. Like, he actually has like scars and sores from where she stabbed him with it. So this time it's a little bit more real. He's like, hey, something is happening here. So Mr. Wales, being super freaked out, decides to sleep in the barn for 2 weeks because he's like, I'm absolutely not going back in that house. Something is going on. But after 2 weeks, you know, you kind of forget. You're like, maybe I just imagined it. Maybe I'm just, you know, I'm being ridiculous. So he goes back into the house. The first thing he does is he goes to the kitchen because he wants to wash up. He's been sleeping in like the hay and out in the barn for so long. Like, he feels disgusting. He's like, I need to clean up. So he's kind of washing his face in the sink. He looks in the mirror and he sees Mary's face just covered in blood. It said that like chunks of her face were falling off because of how violently he stabbed her. There's like a huge slit down the middle of her lips. So like when she talks, it just looks messed up, you guys. So again, she eerily whispers to him, "Father." And she raises her hand and it's got these jagged, gross, cut up hand, gross nails, and she scratches him with it. So he's got this huge gash down the side of his face. So again, Mr. Wales runs out of the house, runs down to the barn, and his heart is beating through his chest. He's just like hyperventilating. He's like, what the hell is going on? And you know, every time he's gone to the barn since, it's kind of been like a safe spot for him, so he feels a bit safer out here than he does in the house. But then again, he hears this "Father" as he's inside the barn. So he whips around and he sees Bloody Mary standing in the dark corner of the barn, and she's just staring at him with her glowing red eyes. As he's staring at her, Mary kind of raises her hand and points upward. Mr. Wales looks up and there's a noose hanging in the barn, and then one last time he hears Mary go, "Father." And then he starts to climb up the rings of the ladder towards the noose, and that's where the story ends. This one is a bit more of like kind of an urban legend type feel, but I thought it was kind of a fun one to add in here. Not fun as in like not fun as in Barney fun, but a little bit more playful than the more historic background versions for Bloody Mary. As you can see, this story has a closer tie to Bloody Mary herself, just because, you know, it's got the mirrors, it's got her cut up bloody face. She is kind of this haunting apparition through the whole story. I think this one does kind of tie in a little bit closer than the Elizabeth Bathory story, but I find them both very interesting. The next story that we are going to talk about that people have kind of connected to Bloody Mary is the statue of Black Agnes. This story is kind of specifically tied to Baltimore, Maryland, and this legend sprung up around a statue that was a grave marker. It almost looks like the Virgin Mary a little bit, like not, but a little bit, like it's kind of this cloaked woman. And so this kind of mournful looking figure was given the name Black Agnes, just kind of from people around the town. And I mean, it's kind of a creepy looking statue. Like, I'd prefer you not to put that kind of shit on my grave, but that's just me. So the statue has kind of had to been moved multiple times because like fraternities and sororities would kind of dare each other to go out and see this black statue, or like this Black Agnes statue, because apparently the folklore is that if you lay in her arms, you know, something evil will befall you or you'll die. So the statue has actually been moved to a couple different cemeteries and then a park, and now it's actually in the Smithsonian Museum, which I found sort of. I always love it when a good folklore works out for history. The actual person buried under the Black Agnes statue was a Civil War general named Felix Agnes. But a lot of teenagers and, you know, people who wanted to embellish the folklore believed that Black Agnes represented the person that was in the grave. Like, it wasn't just a grave marker, it was supposed to be like a statue of the person who had died. Rumors circulated that Black Agnes represented a woman who died of a broken heart and wanted to get revenge from the other side. It is said that Black Agnes' eyes would glow bright red, and apparently lying in her stone arms was fatal to anyone who did it. So in some regions, Black Agnes has overlapped with Bloody Mary, because instead of chanting Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, you chant Black Agnes or Aggie. Now, the only real connections I see here between Bloody Mary and this, besides the chanting, is that Black Agnes's eyes glow red. In some versions of Bloody Mary, her eyes also glow red in the mirror. So that's kind of like a light connection, but it is kind of interesting. It's almost like a regional version of Bloody Mary where, you know, everyone else calls it Bloody Mary, but in certain regions they kind of have their own spin on the same legend, and I find that super interesting. Those are all the stories I'm going to be sharing with you today. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about Mary Worthington, Queen Mary, along with Bloody Mary from Michigan, which is like another regional Bloody Mary tale. Let's take a quick look at what you can expect next week. They took revenge into their own hands. However, immediately after moving the stone, like a bunch of weird-ish started happening. Honestly, burning people at the stake was just like a thing in Europe for a while. Like, that's just what you did. A long time ago, there was a little girl named Mary, and she got in. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss next week's video, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at thatspooky lifestyle for more videos. I will see you guys next week.